Hello, NFL fans, and welcome back to the Wall of NFL channel, where today we are talking about who is going to be making the playoffs in the 2022 season. I know it's a little bit early to kind of talk about it, and I know that there's so much that could potentially happen between now and January when the playoffs are going to start, and also, a lot of these teams could not do well or do really well, and I think there's a lot of things that we got to unpack. But just based on their off seasons and last year and their rosters, where do I think these teams are going to land? I'll let you know in this video. Big thank you to Stolenized Productions, who is in the chat. Thank you so much for the like, and welcome back to the channel. I haven't seen you in a while. So we're also going to talk about Baker Mayfield and him being traded to the Panthers. And we're also going to mention Terry McLaurin's contract because I know that was a week ago, or I should have mentioned it a week ago, but I wasn't on for some personal reasons. So we'll start things off in the AFC, I think. We'll go from 7-1 just because I think, we'll build up to something better. So let's start ourselves off with the LA Chargers. Now, I'm a big fan of the LA Chargers. If you've been around before, you'll know I've gone to SoFi Stadium for a tour. You'll know I love Justin Herbert. You'll know I love what the Chargers did in the offseason. And that's got to be headlined by Khalil Mack, who is a defensive end. He's won the 2016 Defensive Player of the Year. He's been an All-Pro in 3 different years. He has led the NFL in sacks on multiple years. And he's just an absolute game wrecker. And he's a fantastic defensive end. And having him on the other side of Joey Bosa, who is one of the top defensive ends in the NFL, I think that's going to be excellent. Khalil Mack is on a bit of a downward slope from his previous. He's getting on a little bit in age, and he's not quite as effective as he used to be. But that's why he's going to be the perfect second fiddle to Joey Bosa. The Chargers also signed the best corner in free agency, J.C. Jackson, who, by the way, is not just the best corner in free agency, but also one of the best in the NFL as well. He was so key for the Patriots last year, and he really helped the Patriots get to the playoffs and helped their defense be as good as it was. So J.C. Jackson, excellent signing. And they also bolstered their offensive line, which was their biggest problem, actually. If you're thinking about what the Chargers could improve on last year, Justin Herbert did not have a lot of time in the pocket. And speaking of Justin Herbert, he is an unreal quarterback. So the fact that they've got him for a long time to come, I would guess at least 15 years, unless he for some reason retires early like Andrew Luck did back in the day. But Justin Herbert, having him there is going to be brilliant. And Brandon Staley gets another season under his belt. He was a rookie head coach last year, will have learnt a lot, and now gets to put that into practice this year. So I think the Chargers are going to do really, really well this year. But they are the Chargers, and they do bottle it a lot. So let's hope that they don't bottle it so much this year for Chargers fans out there. They're also in a very tough division. So this team being the 7th seed, I think they're most likely to fall out of the playoff contention than any other teams I'm going to mention. Potentially lose out to the Raiders or Steelers or Patriots or Dolphins. It's quite a strong AFC, so it wouldn't surprise me massively if the Chargers didn't make it. But out of all the teams, I think the Chargers have done the best in the offseason, and they were so close to getting it last year. I think they'll be the team to make it. Okay, so on to the Bengals now. And I think they're going to take the 6th seed. Now, I know this is quite a bit lower to where they were last year. They finished 4th and won their division last year. And now 6th is a bit of a step down considering this team got to the Super Bowl last year. It is a difference, but I think there is going to be a bit of a hangover from last year because they did so well in getting to the Super Bowl, and they beat so many expectations. It's not going to be quite the same as it was last year. And I think they are going to struggle a little bit more. But I think some things they've really got going for them is that Joe Burrow is an excellent quarterback and really showed his development last year. They have Jamar Chase, and both of those guys are going to have another season under their belt, have a bit more experience. Zach Taylor is going to have a lot more experience, having gotten to the playoffs and won 3 of the 4 playoff games he was in. And, the team, they've really improved their offensive line, which was dreadful. I think they conceded 50 sacks, which is the worst in the NFL last season. So the fact that they've really improved, I think I'm not sure exactly who they got, but this offseason, that's really been where they've been targeting their improvements. So they're going to be a lot better as a whole team, but they're going to have a bit of a target on their back, and I think there might be a bit of a hangover or sophomore slump, a lot of people like to say. So they're going to do a little bit worse, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if they won their division. And you'll see who I think are going to win the division in a couple minutes' time. So next we'll move on. Sorry, I went back to the Chargers. The Broncos. Now, I think the Broncos are a bit of they're a wild card team in the sense of what position they'll make in the playoffs. But I think they're a bit of a wild card in terms of they may miss out of the playoffs entirely because, Russell Wilson may need some time to settle in. And the same with their new head coach as well. And, the team, it's not used to winning so much in recent years. So they might struggle. And they're in the toughest division in the NFL, possibly one of the toughest divisions of all times. Last year they finished 4th in their division because they lacked a quarterback, but now they've got Russell Wilson, and things might be a little bit different. So Russell Wilson is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and he's going to be a real difference maker for the Broncos. And their offseason was phenomenal just purely because they got him, and it makes them a Super Bowl contender. And the last couple of years as well, Tom Brady won the Super Bowl when in his first season on the Buccaneers. Matthew Stafford just won the Super Bowl in his first season with the Rams. And now the Broncos have just signed Russell Wilson, another elite quarterback who's just gone to a new team. And so maybe it's written in the stars that they might win this one. I'm not convinced that they will because they're in such a tough division, a tough conference. The AFC is completely stacked. If these guys were in the NFC, I may even predicted that they'd win the whole conference, get the number 1 seed. But because the AFC is so tough, they're gonna struggle a little bit more. But who knows? I think that the Broncos have a really good chance of making the playoffs, considering their team, the depth of the squad that they have, the roster, and their addition of an elite passer. So now moving on to the Colts. I don't think the Colts deserve to be in the playoffs. I mean, if you think about it, the Raiders, I think maybe even the Steelers aren't better, I guess, but the Raiders are better. The Patriots are better. The Dolphins are better. And I think there's a lot of teams that probably deserve to be in the playoffs more than the Colts in the AFC. But someone in that division has to win it. And if it's not the Titans, which I think will take a massive step back this year, it's going to be these guys, the Colts. They do have last year's best running back, Jonathan Taylor, who almost won the MVP, in fact. They have Matt Ryan, one of the better quarterbacks in the league, but not quite elite. He's getting on a bit in age. And as a whole team, they have got a pretty good roster. They've got Darius Leonard on defense. They've got a really good offensive line, and the offensive line has been really good for a long time. So Matt Ryan's going to get a lot of time to throw, and with that time, we're going to see as good as he can be. So I think they've got a good opportunity to win their division, and that's why I put them 4th in the AFC playoff race. Not to say that they're the really good team, but they're good enough to win their division, the poorest division in the NFL. So next up, the Baltimore Ravens. And I know this was actually the hardest decision that I had to make, I think, because the Bengals are a really good team. And there's a bit of problems this offseason with the Ravens, with Lamar Jackson not yet signing a contract, which maybe he'll be leaving the Ravens in next year's offseason. They've had to trade Marquise Brown as well, because Marquise Brown wanted to leave. So that's their best wide receiver out. So their passing game is really going to struggle. But their running game is going to be better than ever. They have all of their running backs back off of injury. Gus Edwards. I can't remember everyone's name in this moment, sorry. But they do have a lot of players coming back from injury. They were decimated last year. So many season-ending injuries early on in the year, and it made it really difficult for them to compete with the Bengals. So if the Bengals are going to have a sophomore slump, the Ravens are going to take that win in the AFC North. And whilst Lamar Jackson hasn't signed a new contract, he's still there, and they've still got John Harbaugh, and that organization just breathes success. They're a brilliant organization, and they're always going to be around the playoffs, if not inside and competing for a Super Bowl. So I think they're a good bet to finish in the number 3 seed in the 2022 AFC playoff race. So these next two, I think it's kind of obvious now. It's either the Chiefs or the Bills. And I think one team has gotten better and one team has gotten worse this offseason. I think the team that's gotten worse is the Kansas City Chiefs. They've lost possibly the best receiver in the league, Tyreek Hill. He was such a difference maker. And anytime you put the ball in his hands, no matter where on the field, he was always a threat to score a touchdown. And they're really going to miss that. Tyreek Hill had a really large chunk of the team's receptions. He and Travis Kelce were pretty much the only targets Mahomes trusted, and I think that's going to be a huge miss now that they're without him. They've brought in Marquez Valdes-Scantling. They've also brought in Sky Moore and Juju Smith-Schuster, but none of those are number one receivers. I mean, they have got Kelce, the tight end, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but they don't have anyone to replace Tyreek Hill, and they are still going to be a really good team, and especially in the regular season, I think they're going to be brilliant, but maybe in the playoffs, I think they might struggle a little bit because they won't have that X factor that Tyreek Hill was that could get them out of any situation. I mean, the amount of clutch plays that he made late into the playoff runs in Super Bowls, I think that the Chiefs are definitely going to miss him in this year. And that takes... actually, let me mention before we move on to the Bills, our number 1 seed, I also think they're not going to win the AFC because they also lost Tyrann Mathieu to the Saints. Tyrann Mathieu was one of their marquee defenders. He's a safety and was such a difference maker. I've been saying that a lot, but if you're mentioning players that are going to really impact how a team does, Tyrann Mathieu is one of them, and he's going to be a big miss for the Kansas City Chiefs. So because they've kind of decreased a little bit, I think they're going to struggle. They're going to get the number 2 seed as they did last year. And whilst the rest of the AFC has improved, maybe the Chiefs won't finish in the 2nd seed, but I think their experience with the quality that Mahomes has, with the receiver that Kelce is, and with their head coach Andy Reid, I think they do have the quality and the experience to get this number 2 spot. And then moving on to, I think, the best team in the NFL, the Buffalo Bills. They have possibly the best quarterback in the NFL, Josh Allen, who has, I think, let me find his stats for you, because he was really, really tough to stop last year. Josh Allen had 4,407 yards, 36 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. 15 interceptions is quite high, but he also had 763 rushing yards. And when your offense goes almost entirely through someone that special, it's going to go really well. I mean, no matter who the Bills played against, Josh Allen rose to every single occasion. The games that come to mind against the Chiefs in the divisional round of the playoffs, when it was do or die, unfortunately, Josh Allen and the Bills did die on that occasion and they didn't make it to the championship game. But it was miraculous to see him competing with Patrick Mahomes, and he is so talented. In fact, Chris Sims recently ranked him the number 1 quarterback in the NFL. So there's a lot of debate actually whether he's better than Mahomes. I don't think he's quite there, but he's so athletic, he's so big and strong, he doesn't really get injured, so he can run the ball, and there's not very many negatives or consequences to that. And also as a passer, he has a phenomenal arm. He can make every single throw. And, well, to be honest, he's why they're going to make the playoffs. But the reason they're going to get the number 1 seed is that Sean McDermott, their head coach, is a fantastic head coach. And year after year after year, they get better and better and better. And if they're making it as far as they are into the playoffs every year, this year they're going to make it to the Super Bowl, I think. And they are the best team in the NFL at this moment, in my opinion. Things can always happen, especially in the playoffs or Super Bowls, but I think they're my favorites to go all the way, considering the incredible depth of squad that they have, and their head coach, their coaching staff is phenomenal. And let me just mention before we move on, Von Miller. They signed Von Miller, who just won the Super Bowl with the Rams, and he is going to be really fantastic at rushing the passer. He's going to be another element that's just going to make it really hard for other teams to stop. So here we are moving on to the NFC. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to take that 7th spot yet again in the NFC. Last year they got 7th, and this year I think they'll do the exact same. Jalen Hurts, he's going to develop more as a quarterback, and he's going to be improving. Nick Sirianni, I think, is also going to be improving in his 2nd year as a head coach, and there's going to be a lot of development and improvement. I think just thinking about the same team that there was last year. But not to mention, they also have A.J. Brown, one of the best receivers in the league. They traded for him from the Titans for a 1st-round pick during the NFL draft, and I think he is going to help that passing game really step up. And if the passing game steps up and joins that running game to the standard that their running game was last year, it's going to be really hard for that offense to stop. The running game last year was one of the best in the NFL. Jalen Hurts had 10 rushing touchdowns, more than any other quarterback, and it's so hard to stop a quarterback like that, especially in the red zone. And defensive coordinators, head coaches of the opposing teams really struggle to defend against Jalen Hurts. So I think that they're going to be in the playoffs again next year because of the improvements of the squad that they have, and also because of the development of the players and coaches they already have. So the next one I'm going to talk about is the Arizona Cardinals. This is a bit of a step back from how they did last year, in fact, because Kyler Murray, there's talk that he might not play if he doesn't get a new contract, which he hasn't so far. And I also think that they've lost a little bit of talent in Chandler Jones defensively. So defensively, I don't think they'll be quite as good. So I think they might take a step back in that way. And the way the season ended last year as well, they've got to change that momentum because they really struggled after Thanksgiving. They lost in a whimper to the Rams in the playoffs. So I really think that they've got to kind of change that momentum around and see what they can do to try and, remedy the failures that they had later on at the end of last season. I would say, though, they do have a bit of a better offense kicking off next year as well. They traded for Marquise Brown, who we mentioned when we talked about the Ravens earlier on in the show. And I think that he and Kyler Murray are going to have a fantastic relationship. They played in college together, and I think that those two are going to grow really well. They might not start amazingly because, DeAndre Hopkins also has a 6-game suspension. So their offense is going to be similar to how it was last year, but different, if that makes sense. Because those first 6 games, they're not going to have DeAndre Hopkins, but they'll have Marquise Brown instead. So it's going to look the same, but for the change of those 2 wide receivers. But after those 6 games, I think that's really going to help give the Cardinals a boost. And maybe that will make it so that the second half of the season drop-off is a little bit later, with DeAndre Hopkins joining the squad a little bit later when he'll have a bit of a healthier body. So I think Marquise Brown will really add to the team and improve the squad. But it might not be so initially until that 6 games is up. But I mean, if the Cardinals can complete their run of good form later on into the season, I think they'll have be in a good position to finish high on the list. But again, I don't know. I think they will do a little bit worse than last year because they started the year 8-0. So they hadn't lost a game for the first 8-9 weeks. And that's going to be tough to do. So it really depends on when that drop-off late into the season is, or whether they have one at all, I think, for the Cardinals. Sorry, that was a bit of a waffle, I think, on that one. But moving on to number 5, the Saints. Now, I support the Saints, so I might be a little bit biased. I might be a little bit high on them, and not in a drug sense, but in terms of I'm really excited to see them play. I mean, Jameis Winston coming back off of injury. I mean, it's not the best. He was limping around a little bit a month ago in training camp, but having Jameis there for a whole season, hopefully, that would have put us in the playoffs last year. And if we would have been in the playoffs with Jameis Winston last year, imagine adding to that Michael Thomas, who we didn't have last year due to injury, who, by the way, the season before won Offensive Player of the Year, broke the record for number of catches in a season. He was absolutely phenomenal receiver. It was with Drew Brees, who we don't have anymore. But I think he's going to strike up a pretty good partnership with Jameis Winston. And we've also drafted Chris Olave. We've also as well acquired Jarvis Landry as well. So that receiving core has gone from the worst in the NFL by far. Our best receiver was like would have barely even made the team for some of the teams out there, like the Cowboys. None of our wide receivers would have been on their team. But this year, I think that this wide receiving corps could be, well, I think it is top 5 in the NFL. Maybe top 3. I'll have to give it a little bit more, think about it a little bit more, I think. But it's going to be a really tough offense to stop. As well, if you have Alvin Kamara, possibly the best running back in the league as well. We'll say top 5 running back, just so that I'm not too much of a homer. But anyway, I think the Saints are going to have an excellent year last year. They've also got, I think, the best secondary in the NFL. They've added Tyrann Mathieu, and they've also added Marcus May as well. They have lost Marcus Williams, but I think that this secondary is going to be an excellent unit, and it's going to be really hard for teams to score on us and also to defend against us with our new look offense as well. My only worry about the Saints is Sean Payton leaving and Dennis Allen becoming head coach. There might be a bit of growing pains with that, so we might struggle, but I do think the Saints are going to make the playoffs next year. Maybe not quite as high as 5th. I think maybe the Cardinals might have a better season, but the Saints are definitely going to make it. And I actually think that they can challenge for the division against the Buccaneers. If the Buccaneers drop off a little bit last year, which I think they might, but I think there still might be a little bit of a gap between the two teams. So I think the Saints will finish 5th, but if they finish a little bit lower, fair enough, because I might have bumped them up a spot because I'm really excited to see them play this year. Moving on to the division winners, and I think the Cowboys are going to win the NFC East. So they're going to take the 4th seed, and whilst I do think they've gotten a little bit worse from last year, having lost Amari Cooper, I do think that they made a very smart draft pick, drafting an offensive lineman, so that aging unit is going to get a little bit younger and improve a little bit as well. So I think that's going to give Dak Prescott a lot of time to throw, give the running backs better lanes to run through, and despite losing Amari Cooper, it might not be an awful loss, because I think that the Cowboys' offense last year was the best in the NFL. They were averaging over 400 yards a game. And if it's anything like it was last year, or even slightly lower, it still could be a top 5, top 10 offense. And I think that's still going to be enough to win the NFC East. The Eagles are closing the gap to the Cowboys, with the Cowboys getting a little bit worse, Eagles getting a lot better. But I still think the Cowboys win that division, and I don't think it'll be an awful lot of stress for them, considering the vast difference in quality between the Cowboys and the rest of their division. I think the Cowboys are in a similar place to the Colts, but the Cowboys look to me like they're going to win the division, but the Colts, they could lose out to the Titans in the AFC. So then now we're going to talk about the Buccaneers. I've already said that I think that they are going to drop off a little bit, and they could see quite a close challenge by the Saints up until the end of the season. But I do think the Buccaneers will pip the Saints to the title in the end in the NFC South. So the Buccaneers, they have the greatest quarterback of all time, Tom Brady. That's not arguable anymore. I always like to argue that it was Drew Brees, but I kind of know where I'm standing with that now, after Tom Brady is challenging now for his 8th Super Bowl ring. Far more than any other player. So the Buccaneers, I think, they're going to win the NFC South. But they have lost Antonio Brown. Well, I mean, Antonio Brown kind of went halfway through last year. I think the Buccaneers have also lost Ndamukong Suh. And in terms of the overall quality of the team, the depth of the roster has definitely diminished. So I think that the Buccaneers will have a tougher time. They always lose to the Saints twice in the regular season. And I think there might be more losses in there, considering the Panthers, they might be getting slightly better now with Baker Mayfield. The Falcons, Arthur Smith, their head coach, has got another season under his belt, and maybe they'll be improving. I'm not convinced that the Falcons will, but there's just a chance that they could. And the Buccaneers, I think the only thing going for them at the moment, considering their decrease in roster depth, I think the fact that they're in the NFC and in not such a great division, I think that it puts them in a good position to win the NFC South. Because, well, let's be honest, Panthers and Falcons suck. The Saints, I mean, they could be bad, but I really don't think that I think it's 75% chance of making. I would say 80% chance of the Saints making the playoffs. But the only worry there is Sean Payton going. But anyway, the Buccaneers, it's going to be a little bit of an easy ride to the playoffs, considering the conference they're in. All the NFC teams have gotten a little bit worse, with the AFC improving. And I think, yeah, the Buccaneers, they look like they're in a solid position to win their division. And I think that they will have an easier time of it than the Cowboys will in theirs. And that's why I put the Buccaneers in the third spot. I mean, the Buccaneers as well, they just have Tom Brady, and they have a chance to get through the playoffs and get to the Super Bowl as long as they have Tom Brady. And, that's all you need, really. They also, actually, I haven't mentioned, they have got a new head coach. They have moved on from Bruce Arians, and now they have Todd Bowles. Bruce Arians retired just as Tom Brady was coming back, so maybe there was a bit of a rift in the changing room, in the locker room. But Todd Bowles, it's going to be his first year as a head coach, so there might be a little bit of growing pains as well, similar to Dennis Allen at the Saints. They've also lost Gronkowski, which I mentioned in the last show 2 weeks ago, who retired. So again, the Buccaneers are getting a bit worse, but the quality that they have with Tom Brady, I think, is going to put them over the line and help them get the third spot in the NFC. And moving on now to the Packers. So the Packers is an interesting one because it really depends on Aaron Rodgers. He's a fantastic quarterback in the regular season. He's, if not the best, well, he's second best, if not the best quarterback in the regular season ever, maybe behind Peyton Manning. He has won 2 MVPs back-to-back, 4 all-time, and he's always tough to stop on his day. However, his day might be getting more infrequent when you consider that Davante Adams has just moved to the Raiders, and whilst the defense is still really good for the Packers, in fact, I was checking up on fantasy recently, they're projected the most amount of fantasy points out of all defenses, but they don't have a number 1 receiver anymore, and that could be a big problem for Aaron Rodgers, because he didn't really trust many other players last year aside from Davante Adams and Aaron Jones. They still have Aaron Jones, so that's going to be something. He's a really great running back, but I think Aaron Rodgers is going to find it difficult to trust his receivers at first. There also could be a bit of a... he could relax a little bit considering his brand new $50 million a year contract. He's $200 million over 4 years, highest paid player of all time. I think he might relax a little bit, not be quite as good. I mean, I don't expect a third MVP in a row. And now that Jordan Love, the backup, isn't really vying for that position, he hasn't got a chip on his shoulder anymore in terms of being replaced. So he might get a little bit worse. I know that a lot of players, when they sign that big money contract, do drop off in form a little bit. And that could happen with the Packers. But considering that they're up against the Bears, Lions, and Vikings in their division, it's going to be plain sailing. And the rest of the NFC as well, it should be a lot of easy wins in there. And, Aaron Rodgers, he's a regular season phenomenon. So I think the Packers are going to get the number 2 seed in the NFC. Now, moving on to the LA Rams. The Rams won the Super Bowl last year, and they've kept all their best players, and they've kept their head coach as well. And their head coach seems to find coordinator after coordinator to fill more and more shoes, and it's just a phenomenally run team, which is a surprise if you got with Stan Kroenke in charge, considering what he's done to Arsenal. But let's stick to NFL, and I do think the Rams are really well run, well coached. They have some fantastic players, headlined by Matthew Stafford and Aaron Donald. They've got the best wide receiver in the NFL last year, who won Offensive Player of the Year. and the Super Bowl MVP. They've got a really, really stacked squad, and they've managed to keep them all. In fact, their wide receivers, I think they've managed to improve as well, adding the Bears wide receiver. His name escapes my mind at the moment. I think his name's Allen. First name definitely escapes me. But they're going to be improving more and more. And last year, the NFC West was the best division in the NFL. This year, it's not going to be anywhere near that. The Seahawks have lost Russell Wilson, who I mentioned went to the Broncos earlier. The 49ers look like they're moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo, and they're going to go with their sophomore quarterback, Trey Lance. And their other competition, so for Cardinals, I think they might have a drop-off as well, as I previously mentioned in this video. So I think their road to the playoffs is going to be easier, and they're going to be just as good as they were last year. So I think the Rams are going to finish the number 1 seed in the NFC. And how could they not keep getting better and better as Matthew Stafford settles in? And you know, Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, Stafford, they've all signed big money contracts. Maybe there'll be a little bit of a comfort that sets in with these players because they were all trying to win a Super Bowl. There was a bit of talk of retirement by McVay, by Aaron Donald. So there might be, a bit of comfort similar to how I mentioned with Aaron Rodgers. But I think they're definitely the best team in the NFC at the moment. And I would be surprised if they didn't get that number 1 seed as well. So to recap, the AFC teams that I think are going to make the playoffs, the number 1 seed right in the middle of the screen, the Buffalo Bills, followed by the left-hand side, got Chiefs, Ravens, Colts. That side, is inverted, so it's all a bit messed up. And on the other side, Broncos, Bengals, Chargers. So that's the order. Bills 1, Chiefs 2, Ravens 3, Colts 4, Broncos 5, Bengals 6, Chargers 7. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals and Ravens switched completely, 3rd and 6th. But that's how I've got it at the moment. I could definitely be persuaded, Bengals and Ravens. And also, I think that Raiders, Steelers, Dolphins and Patriots might make it as well. Patriots, they've got Bill Belichick. They got a well-run team. They definitely could make the playoffs. The Dolphins, they've got a rookie head coach, so might not make it to the playoffs. And they have Tua as well, who I'm not convinced is the best player, but they do have a really stacked squad and have improved it massively this offseason. So they could make it. The Steelers haven't had a losing season in like 20 years, so they could definitely make the playoffs. And finally, the Raiders, they've improved massively. Devontae Adams and Derek Carr are going to have a really great partnership, I think. So definitely another team to look out for to maybe take the Chargers spot in number 7. And another recap of the NFC, same deal. Rams number 1, Packers 2, Buccaneers 3, Cowboys 4. Those are division winners on the left-hand side. And the Saints, Cardinals, and you can't see behind it, but the Eagles below. And sorry, you couldn't see. The Chargers are right behind me there as well. So the Chargers are number 7 below the Bengals, and the Eagles number 7 below the Cardinals in the NFC. So that's how I think it's going to play out. I wouldn't be surprised by maybe the Cardinals and Saints switching, or I think it'll be Eagles, Cardinals, Saints, but maybe in a different order. I can't see many other teams in the NFC kind of vying for any positions. Maybe the Vikings, I can't really see it happening because the quality of the NFC is not quite there yet, and I think these are the 7 teams that are going to make it out of these guys. 49ers might happen because they have a great head coach, a really good team. But if they start Trey Lance, they're going to struggle because he's not the most polished quarterback in the world, is he? So moving on to the news segment now. And the first player I want to talk about has to be Baker Mayfield. It is a pretty crazy situation. So it's been well documented that Baker wants to leave the Browns, and the Browns want Baker to leave as well and head to another team. But because he's entering his 5th year as a quarterback, or maybe is it 4th? He's going to have quite a high price tag. So he's going to be earning around $30 million this year coming up. So the teams that wanted to trade for him, maybe the Seahawks and Panthers, they didn't want to pay that much. So they were asking the Browns to pay quite a bit of his salary, and the Browns weren't really keen. So it's taken quite a while for a deal to get done. And I think it's been agreed that the Browns will pay about $5 million of his salary, and the Panthers will trade the rest, as the Panthers have traded a conditional 5th round pick for Baker Mayfield. Now, Baker's definitely worth more than a 5th round pick, but he's quite a disruptive player, and the Browns definitely just want him gone. I think if Baker was a stand-up guy who wasn't a distraction, he could have even gotten a 2nd round pick, because he's got a good amount of talent. Maybe not the strongest arm, and maybe not the best player, but as he played through his injury last year, and he struggled a little bit last year, and I think that's why he's gotten quite a low price tag. And of course, he's quite temperamental. And so he's going to be at the Panthers this year. And how do I think that affects both teams? So the Browns, they're going to be without, a really good backup. So Baker's a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's definitely good enough to be that. And with Deshaun Watson possibly being suspended the entire year, Baker Mayfield would have been a really good backup and a really good person to have holding that spot until Deshaun Watson gets back from suspension. But he did not want to play there at all. So it was quite clear of that as well. So I'm not sure who the Browns have there. It might be Jacoby Brissett at this point. And Jacoby Brissett, very competent backup as well. But it's going to be a bit of a wasted year for the Browns, because Deshaun Watson, I'd be really surprised if he didn't have a season suspension. I'd be surprised if we saw him in a Browns uniform this year on a Sunday. So I think that it might be a wasted year for the Browns, especially in a division with the Bengals and Ravens. I don't think they have much of a chance of making the playoffs. Come 2023, though, it'll be a different story. The Panthers, on the other hand, I think that they're going to have a lot of potentially quite a bit of success with Baker Mayfield. I don't think that the Panthers are a very good team at all. They have a terrible offensive line, and it'll be quite a shift from possibly the best offensive line in the league last year that he was behind. So the Panthers, they're not a good team. So Baker's going to struggle. And I don't think he's 10 times better than Sam Darnold. I think he is better. And Sam Darnold is definitely not the Panthers guy. And Baker Mayfield could be. But the offensive line is still terrible. And Baker's going to struggle when he's out there on the field. He's going to have worse receivers, worse offensive line, worse defense. He's going to find it difficult. He's also going to have a worse coaching staff, in my opinion, as well. So he's going to struggle. He might take a year to really get his footing firm. So I think they're going to struggle. And, had Tom Brady not been in the NFC South, I think maybe they could finish second in their division with Baker. But I still think 6-11, 7-10 is about where they're going to finish. And they're not going to be able to compete with the Saints or Buccaneers, unfortunately, for the Panthers. And moving on now to our other piece of news, Terry McLaurin has signed a 3-year, $70 million deal. And that is going to set him up for a while. Carson Wentz is going to be his new quarterback, so let's see about how that relationship is going to go. But Terry McLaurin has shown that he's actually one of the best receivers in the NFL. He's a really, really great player. And the fact that he's done it with 3 or 4 different quarterbacks in a really not very good team, it just shows the amount of talent that he has, that he's doing it year in and year out. So well done for Terry McLaurin. He finally gets what he deserves to be paid like the number 1 receiver that he is. But I'm sure it took some convincing to get him to stay for 3 years, because the Commanders, they don't seem like a team that's going to be competing for the playoffs at the moment, unless Carson Wentz has a magical year like he did in 2017. So that kind of brings us to a close. We'll just zoom back to the top where the thumbnail is. There we go. Sorry if that kind of messed with anyone's head a little bit. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know what you guys think. Oh, do you do fantasy football? Yes, Noam, I do. Thank you so much for commenting. I didn't see it earlier. But actually, one of the things I wanted to mention is that if you want to play fantasy with me and some other Wall of NFL fans, I'll be setting up leagues in due course. I'll be putting videos out on how to join them. Just drop a comment or something and I'll make sure I get you the details personally, or just watch the video that will come out soon. We did the same thing last year and it was a great success. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of my friends in there as well. So, I mean, being in a league with me might be something that you might like, and I will certainly love to be in a league with you as well. So it'll just be a standard NFL.com league. And yeah, I can't wait for fantasy. It's one of my favorite kind of things going on in the NFL, and it's one of the things that made me love it so much. So I'm definitely going to talk about fantasy a little bit as the season goes by. And for sure, if you want to be in a fantasy league with me, stay tuned on the channel and we can make it happen. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, all of you that tuned in. Be sure to check out Wall of NFL on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. There's also a TikTok, but I don't update that very often. And yeah, be sure to come back again next week. In 2 weeks' time, I won't be here. Be my birthday, so I won't be on. But next week I should be, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all again then. So thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.